I think you have to click the sound yourself, maybe.
Do I have it turned down? So if I record the slideshow, do I just have to wait for it to run through?
Mm-hmm.
And then it will be a video?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know.
Oh, so you're clicking
Media
it yourself.
not found.
Is California the only state with the new law? At the present, yes, although a bill was submitted in um, Alabama recently, and we'll talk about this in a moment. However, what is important to note is that Title IX might be affected, uh, according to some critics or pundits, if uh, name, image, and likeness laws are passed. Um, for example, some people will argue that if name, image, and likeness is passed, then less money will be going for non-revenue sports, and in particularly women's sports. Some argue that it will not help with the recruiting because those that offer the most money will probably go to the big schools, so it will make it difficult to recruit. Of course, we do not know exactly what will happen to Title IX until we know what legislation, whatever legislation is passed, what it will look like. So we must have to sit and wait to see. As I was mentioning before, a bill was passed in Alabama recently that would allow college athletes to profit off their names and likeness. This law that was submitted by Representative Hatcher in Alabama has five key elements in the bill. Number one is it will prevent Alabama schools from limiting the compensation earned by student athletes or revoking scholarships due to the compensation that they are receiving. Um, Number two, it will prevent athletic associations from bearing schools due to the receipt of compensation by student athletes. The third element is that it will require schools to fund annuities. This is quite interesting for the student athletes who opt out of seeking compensation in the marketplace while they're playing college sports. The fourth element of this bill will require schools in Alabama to conduct financial literacy and life skill workshops to prepare student athletes for life after college athletics. And lastly, it will require a coordination between student athletes and schools regarding contracts entered into by the student athletes. This bill is really one of the first steps in closing the gap that exists nowadays, and certainly won't solve every problem. But it is shining a light on the need to support student athletes um, while they are in school, to be able to generate some revenue or create revenue. Recently, on February 21st, uh, Senator Jerry Morgan of uh, Kansas passed another bill in the House. And this bill in the House basically has not been ratified yet, of course, um, but it has several provisions on the bill. It is known as the Amateur Athletes Protection and Compensation Act. Um, as is indicated, provisions on the bill, the athletes can enter a professional draft, return to college if things don't work out. Uh, Athletes can transfer from one school to another one time without having to see it a year. Now, everybody wonder how is reacting to this. Basically, the NCAA does not particularly like any of the bills that are being introduced, particularly if individual states take unilateral action across the United States, because many of the bills that are being introduced sort of contradict one another. So, um, among the NCAA three divisions, rules and regulations are different. Okay, this is something that the NCAA Board of Governors came up with, and basically has Division One has one rule, Divisions Two and Three have a different one. Division One athletes cannot promote or endorse a commercial product or service if they are not paid to participate in the activity. Uh, Student athletes in Divisions 2 and 3 can be paid for participating in activities under certain conditions. For example, when payment is not based on the individual involvement or athletics. So the NCAA, like I said before, met in Atlanta in 2019. It voted unanimously to allow student athletes to be paid for the use of the name and likeness once the three divisions that I just mentioned decide on those rules. Nothing has happened after January 2021, and we'll see what happened. The bill that was passed in California is supposed to take effect January 1st, 2023. So, what do the student athletes think? What do they want? Well, we asked, 200 student athletes at three Division One institutions within the Power Five conferences. We asked 6 questions. We have 97 students out of the 200 replied. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. Uh, Please understand that this is not a scientific study by any means. Okay, we did not segment the students in any particular way, shape, or form. We did not differentiate whether they're American football players, basketball players, male players, female players, or what sport. We simply sent the questions and we hope to get a reply. More questions and more specific study probably needs to be conducted in the near future, sooner, of course, rather than later. So one of the questions that we ask is, do you support the opportunity to get paid for the use of your name, image, and likeness? Of course, as you can see in this chart, pretty much even responses regarding yes, 47% yes, 44% only some sports, and I'm assuming by only some sports, the students probably assume that men's basketball and men's American football would be the ones, since those two are the sports that generate most of the revenue than all the other sports. The second question we asked was, do you think that making money for your name, image, and likeness will reduce the number of scholarships? The greater percentage of them, of course, don't know, because really nobody really knows what's going to happen. Although it is very probable that the number of scholarships might be reduced, because now students will be making money of the name of the school. So now the schools are probably going to say, well, they're making money of us, so we need to get a percentage of the amount of the money that students are making. So I think, we're opening a can of worms. Some legislation and some rules we have to be determined. The question that we ask is, do you prefer scholarship? Do you prefer to make money of your name, image, and likeness, or do you prefer a combination of both? It's not surprising that almost 60% of the students replied that they would rather make money of their name, image, and likeness rather than receive a scholarship or a combination of both. Yet it's rather interesting that nearly a third, or rather a quarter, of the students replied that they would like a combination of both. The scholarship is no surprise, because the students probably don't think that they will be getting much more of a scholarship if these rules and regulations are. The next question that we asked was, should all student athletes get paid the same regardless of sport, whether it is baseball, badminton, tennis, American football, men's basketball, women's basketball, lacrosse, whatever? Uh, it is interesting that a good percentage of the students, almost 49%, almost half of them really, indicated that they would like to see that all students get paid the same regardless of sport, which is rather interesting. I guess all students know what they're going through and what it takes to be a student athlete, so I'm really not surprised by that response. Should you be allowed to hire an agent while in college? Well, this is interesting, is that pretty much uh, all of them, most of them, excuse me, said yes. Well, pretty much the even number says no or don't know. Um, Personally, I think that students should be able to hire an agent. We're talking about kids here, and these kids might not know what they're getting themselves into. In fact, I would suggest, or in my personal opinion, that if a student hires a lawyer or an agent or whatever while they are in college in order to be represented by them, that I think is something in which the parents need to be involved so they actually know and understand what they're getting themselves into. And the last question is, should schools decide how much a student athlete be compensated? Well, no. A great majority of the students do not trust the schools, apparently. And I can see the reason why. Maybe it is because they feel like they have been exploited all these years and they don't feel that they have been treated fair. Uh, Yet, the amount of scholarships and money that they receive is quite large. Well, before we complete this presentation, let me finish by saying that most people do not know what NIL is or what it stands for. And I think that a great deal of the misunderstanding of what it is driven by the media, particularly those people in the media that are covering the major sports, i.e., American football and men's basketball. Also, we need to understand that there's only a handful of athletes every year that are likely to draw value from their name, image, and likeness, and mostly would be at the major Power 5 conferences. And out of all the students on those conferences, at most 10 to 15 of those students are likely going to be making any money or draw any value from their name, image, and likeness. Perhaps the NCAA or perhaps each conference should assign a mark value or a market value rather to each student athlete, similar to the value of a 4-year scholarship, and that's what the students get paid. Personally, I think that would be something more equitable, but then again, I'm not the expert here. One thing is for sure, it is a complex issue that needs to be resolved and needs to be resolved soon. And it is possible that um, the argument of play for pay will only affect the Power 5 conferences, as I mentioned before, with a few others from the remaining conferences. And certainly, I do not think that it will affect that much schools in the divisions 2 and 3, or even NAIA if we want to include it. The ultimate question is, how much is too much money or not enough? I wish we had the opportunity for questions, because I'm thinking that you probably are asking yourself, what if, but then why and why not? Unfortunately, we can't do that. But nonetheless, I thank you for taking the time to listen to my presentation. Goodbye.